We are long overdue for the augment guide. I'm going to go to teamfight.lol, click on augments, but data is great and everything, but you really have to know what to pick and when and why things are good. You shouldn't just see a number and roll with it. So what you want to do right now, the meta is super level 8 lottery heavy. So what you want to do, in case you watched the tier list video before, you need to be having as much gold as possible to get to level 8. And you need to do that around like stage 4-1 or 4-2, depending on how the game's going. And to do that, you want to typically look at your augments as a way to help you out. So in the early game, the best thing to get right now are all the econ augments. So I don't care what the stats say. If you take an econ augment early and you lose streak properly, and maybe you have heart steal if you don't lose streak properly, you're gonna be doing really well that game. Does not really matter what the stats say. After that, you wanna pick up some combat augments because you need to be a little strong too, right? After you hit all your units, you wanna just buff them up as much as possible. So in stage 3 and 4, you typically want to do combat. So right now, again, stage 2, econ augment into combat. That's going to be the ideal. I'm not saying you should do that every single game, but that is something to be desired. But let's get into all the augments right now. I want to go over all the silver, gold, and prismatic ones and tell you like kind of which ones to look out for, which ones to avoid heavily. So first, we're going to go over all the silver augments on stage 2. Stage 2 is always going to be the most important augment selection point because it pretty much defines most of your game. And you can see already right at the top, we have help is on the way. If we hover over it, this is the one where after 6-player combats, you choose one of 4 support items. What else? Stationary support. All the delayed augments are really powerful. So the first 2, I know we talked about econ augments pretty heavily, but what do these 2 have in common? They power up your team a little later on. So while it isn't like a pure econ augment where it gives you a ton of gold or anything like that, it allows you to lose streak effectively because you can't possibly win rounds when you have like no augment, right? Because for the first 5 rounds or first 6 rounds, you don't have any help from this. So it allows you to kind of lose streak and also make your team more powerful later on. So it's kind of like a delayed combat augment. So both of these are kind of at the top for silver right now. After that, we have Spoils of War. So if we think on the flip side, if a lot of people are lose streaking right now because they want to guarantee a ton of gold, people are playing hard steal, also a guarantee for a ton of gold. If you have any sort of upgraded units, Spoils of War is going to be really good. Spoils of War also falls under one of those categories of augments that are only good when they are picked, and that kind of skews the data a bunch. You will never pick Spoils of War if you can't win streak. So win streak is the best thing to do in TFT. It's just hard to do because you need to get a little lucky, right? But if you do a lose streak, you could almost guarantee it in a lot of cases. But win streaking, there's like no way to actually guarantee it because you could always face someone who hits something super ridiculous and you can't really do much about it. But Spoils of War, very strong in the early game. Stim Pack is another great sack augment. It's you gain 4 components after you lose 50 player health. 1, 2, 3s, you get a bunch of units, you get a ton of gold. A lot of times people either use this to hard force a champion. Let's say you get 2 Jaxes or something like that. Like I don't know what are in people's shops nowadays. Sometimes I see some crazy boards where people are like 2-star Jax at the beginning of the game because they take some of this stuff. But most people are using this augment to kind of just use it as gold or to get hard steal units. That's another great use of this. That's why it's really good too. Iron assets. This one is all right. It's not my first choice, but if you really need to complete an item, it's going to be decent to win streak with. It's kind of like a half and half augment. It gives some gold and some power to your team. Latent Forge is very similar to the support items that we talked about earlier. You get a Orn Forge much later into the game. Vampirism is just really good right now because, again, lose streak. Buried Treasures, it's kind of like delaying power also. But this one does give a little bit more immediate power than the other ones. But sometimes you can't rely on this to win streak with because sometimes you can't rely on this to win streak with because in the first round you are a bit weaker than someone who took like a combat augment. But we could see right here like another econ augment, econ augment, component buffet kind of is like a delayed augment as well. Like a lot of the top augments right now, they're all kind of helping you lose streak at the start, and that's kind of why they're up there. If we look at some of the bad augments, at the bottom we have Indomitable Will. That augment's just not that great right now. There aren't that many units that use it. It doesn't help you win streak in stage 2. Doesn't really help you lose streak either. It's more of like a late game augment. That's why you kind of see it improve a bit. In stage 2, it's a 5.0. In stage 3, 4.76. In stage 4, 4.6, because you need someone who's like really good that can use this augment, and in the early game, you don't have anyone who's really good. Some honorable mentions to avoid is Switching Gears and Young, Wild, and Free. Both of these are just not very reliable in the early game because Young, Wild, and Free, you only want to take this if you are win streaking. But again, this doesn't help you win streak, so I don't know why you would take this in Stage 2. In Stage 3, fantastic if you have high health, because then you just get really nice picks on Carousel. But switching gears, some augments are just mathematically not good, and right now, like, gain 2 gold whenever you break your win or loss streak just doesn't amount to that much. I've never tried forcing a win-lose, 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 but we've never wanted that ever in the history of TFT, so maybe people are using this augment incorrectly, but I assume it's just like luck of the draw, because you either like face someone strong or face someone weak, and you kind of have to have that alternate. There are probably much better things to do. But pretty much a lot of the ones at the bottom are kind of like combat-ish. Sticks and Stones combat, Partial Ascension, Healing Orbs, Silver Veil, Uplink, Resistance. Pandora's is kind of delayed a little bit too, but Harm Assist, Best Friends, Parting Gifts, all these are kind of combat augments, and they are definitely in the bottom of the barrel right now. I'm not saying that there are no times to take them, but you want to make sure that you are able to actually utilize the buff early on. Sometimes I take these and still try to lose streak in the early game just because there's nothing else available, because you always need to kind of tailor stuff to your board. If we look at some of the other augments and just look at them in a general sense, not just on Stage 2, Cybernetic Bulk is incredibly powerful on a lot of different galaxies right now, or a lot of different portals. Some portals give you like a bunch of components or like extra items, and in those cases, Cybernetic Bulk and Uplink are both going to have like a little bit more extra value. This is also another one of those examples of an augment that gets better as you get later into the game, because you just have more items and are able to spread them out much easier. Vampirism performs a little bit better in Stage 3 because you take it if you have low life. What else do we have here? Blistering Strikes, I like this one quite a bit because if you don't have any anti-heal, this kind of fills the slot there automatically. Keepers, I think, is a little underrated. I've used it a couple times. With Silver Keepers, one thing to keep in mind is you don't need to like super maximize Keeper value the whole game, because Silver Augment, you don't need to use it all the time, but it's just something that's like a decent average combat augment that you can kind of use. Unified Resistance, kind of the same thing. I don't really take those that much. I'm trying to look for some of the other honorable mentions. Silver Veil, again, we talked about this before. It's very similar to Indomitable Will, where it gets better the later into the game that you are. 4.7, 4.48, 4.35. But again, in general, in Stage 3 and Stage 4, you want to pick or lean into more of the combat augment picks that we're kind of talking about. Let's move on into the gold augments. This one is going to be, again, starting at Stage 2. Sleight of Hand, this is a really good augment for win streaking with. So people generally only take this if they know they're going to win, because you get like a full item or like an item and a half, and you get 200 health and attack speed. For a gold augment, that's like very, very good, you know? Lucky Streak, great for econ. Portable Forge, I don't really like this one. I don't really know why it's that high. It really rewards like flexible playstyles, but the issue is on Stage 2, you only get 2 choices of Ornn items, which is hit or miss, right? Sometimes if you pick one of your headliner units and they cannot use the items, because ideally you would want to put the item on your headliner, right? Because they're upgraded, they get bonus stats, and you have a bunch of traits for them already. Sometimes you just don't get a usable item for them, and I think that's why I don't really like this. I actually am surprised that this scores this high, but I guess in terms of like raw power, it does add a lot to your team. Submit to the Pit. If you're forcing Jax, only take this if you have like great Jax items. I would not take this just for fun, just because the data says it's good, because again, you're forcing yourself to force Jax. You have to scout. You have to see if other players are going for it. And if you don't have good items, it doesn't matter what augments you have. Your Jax is going to be trash, you know? Vampirism, decent overall for loose streaking. What doesn't kill you? This is probably what I think is like the best augment right now, because it is just the best for loose streaking. You could just like sell your entire board, get like a ton of gold, and almost guarantee a streak. Idealism, very good for win streaking, also great for Jax if you like playing him a lot. Scrappy Inventions, very underrated augment. I think this is one of my favorite ones. I think in like lower ratings this isn't as popular, but it's extremely good if you want to force a certain playstyle and you get a bunch of items that don't really work. For example, for me, I really like playing the attack damage comps right now. And if I get a bunch of rods in the early game, they're pretty useless to me. But with Scrappy Inventions, you kind of have like a new use for them. You could just throw them on a random unit and you get a ton of value that way. This augment is also really good if you have a bunch of good components, but not good items that can be made yet. For example, if I start the game with a bow, a sword, and a chain vest, these are 3 of the best components right now, but oddly enough, I don't like any of the items they make immediately in the early game. I don't want to make a Giant Slayer in the early game. There are no giants to slay. Titan's Resolve kind of forces you into certain builds like Yone or Riven or even Jax, but even in those builds, I think there are better options in a lot of cases. And then you also don't want to just like slam an Edge of Night unless you're forcing those same comps too. So if I'm going the AD tree, I like stuff like Red Buff, I like stuff like Infinity Edge, Deathblade, things like that. But with Scrappy Inventions, I could still use these components and have them on my different characters. And then as I get more and more items later on, I can complete the best in slot items. So I think Scrappy Invention's pretty solid right now. Again, just because people are playing more like not super full power, but it's even better when you have components that you don't want to complete yet. Stationary support, great for win streaking. You just get a training dummy, which is absolutely bonkers in the early game because you get a bunch of life and you also get a support item. I don't really know how to value support items. Ornn items are normally considered 1.5 items. Radiant items are normally considered equivalent to 2 items, but judging by the fact that you get a training dummy attached to your support item, I'm guessing it's somewhere between 1 and 1.5 items. Somewhere around there, I don't know the exact point, but gold augments normally give like 1.5 items. So like Idealism, it gives you 1 item, but you get like the increased damage, so it's like a little bit more, right? Salvage bin, I don't really use too much, like not my favorite augment because you need to be careful when taking this because in order to actually maximize the use out of it, you have to be like really good at the game. I don't know if that makes sense, but essentially if you play Salvage bin, you must know all the best in slots for all the early, mid-game, and late-game units. Normally when you play TFT, you only have to know what's good in the early game and what's good in the late game. Obviously, it helps to know what's good in the mid-game too. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but it's not as important because by the time you reach the mid game, you're like building items for the late game. In the early game, you're building items mainly for the early game. But with Salvage bin, you have to know all the different combinations and it takes a lot of time. We've all had those roll downs where we're like rolling down really quickly, we sell a bunch of our units, and then all of a sudden we run out of time and we can't put all the right units in. So now imagine if you have to put all the right units in and also recombine all your items in like the best in slot ways when you have like 12 components on your bench. Very difficult to do, so only take this if you're like an APM god, for example. A Cut Above is a very, very good item right now. All the AD comps love Deathblade, and this is great for econ, so it allows you to fast 8 really quickly. Spoils of War, talked about that before. Caretaker's Favor. This one is another good, like, sort of delayed augment. It really helps you stabilize in stage 3. So what you can do with Caretaker's Favor is lose streak in the early game if you want, or you could also win streak, but it's very difficult to because you only get 1 component at level 5. But sometimes players are just like so weak because everyone's open forting that sometimes it just happens when you don't even want to, right? But normally you want to lose streak with this or just like even go win-loss with like a heart steal and then stabilize in stage 3 and then get stronger and stronger in stage 4 once you reach level 7 and level 8. Very powerful augment, just gives like a ton of components. You get like 2 items worth of components and you get them in Anvil, so you could like craft whatever you want pretty much. So it's just very, very ideal. Support cache, choose one of 4 support items. So they are definitely weaker than Ornn items because Ornn items you can only choose 2, or like the artifact items. With this one you could choose 4. Obviously pick one that's tailored to your team, but you could also data check all these items. So if we go to items here and then go to the right hand side, go to support items, you could kind of see which ones perform really well. Obviously all of these do well because normally when people get support items, they like got a cash out, for example, from Heartsteel. So they do tend to like skew above average. So the average is around like 4.10 for this one, but you generally want to try to get the ones that are as high as possible, right? Virtue of the Martyr, generally accepted as the best one. Chalice of Power, no surprise that it's at the bottom. I am surprised that Shroud of Stillness and Randuin's are a bit lower, and also Needlessly Big Gem. That one I think is pretty decent in the meta right now because fights are lasting like quite a while. But just because you get support cache doesn't mean you have to only pick the good ones, right? If you get Banshee's Veil, for example, this is the best support item for all the melee carries out there. So if you play Riven, if you play Yone, if you play Jax, Banshee's Veil is going to be absolutely incredible for you. Locket is really good, I like in the mid game. because you get like 5 units just to buff up. I don't like it so much in the early game, and in the late game there are probably better things to get, but these are some things to consider when you're using these augments. So if you're in stage 3, for example, and you pop the support cache and you want a win streak, Locket is probably going to be the one that you want because you'll have enough frontliners to get the full usage of the buff. And because Locket gives like a flat value, what's the shield amount? 250 shield, 20 armor, and 20 MR. That's gonna like giga spike you in the mid game, and you'll just cruise and get like a nice little HP saving augment in stage 3. Other things we could look for, we forgot to do this before, but they are going to be the Ornn items. They call them artifacts now. Honestly, like I disagree with some of this list. I know the data says one thing, but the average is around like 4.3. I think it really depends on what types of champions you're using. I hate getting Death's Defiance, for example, because it only works on melee carries. So stuff like Yone, Akali, all the ones we mentioned before that like are melee carries, Riven, they really like Death's Defiance, and it is by far the best item on them because it gives healing and like a bit of tankiness. But I don't like picking Ornn items because it kind of pigeonholes you into specific team comps. The ones I like to take in the early game is something like Infinity Force because it works on everyone. Tricksters also works on everyone. Zhonya's Paradox, you could always put it at a tank at the end of the day, but it is best on AP carries. Gold Collector is good because you could get gold from it. What else? Sniper Focus is pretty flexible. A lot of the tank ones are pretty flexible too. So that's kind of where I would kind of lean towards. But looking at this list is by no means like a set thing. You can't just be like, oh, Zhonya's Paradox is the best one, Manazane second best, only going to go for those two. I'd probably avoid like the ones at the bottom, like Mogul's Mail, that you need to get hit 40 times to get the bonus of like 2 gold. I would not get it. It's just like very awful in the early game. I also don't like Deathfire's Grasp so much and Goldmancers just because AP comps aren't really my thing, but everything else is like, it's playable, even if they are lower on the totem pole. But I think my favorite is going to be Infinity Force and Tricksters just because they're flexible. But if I'm hard forcing a comp and I know it already, then like, yeah, Death's Defiance on a melee carry or like Manazane on a caster comp is going to be the way to go. Going back here though, where were we? We were at support cache. Patient Study. This one has got to be like one of the best augments right now because it is probably the best econ augment of the gold augments, at least from the ones that I can see here, because all the other ones, they just don't give as much XP as Patient Study. So you just take this, you lose streak, you get 3 XP every combat, and then you just spike really hard at level 8. It's not really that fair. Escort Quest is really good if you're win streaking, and then you get like even more gold during that time frame. So if you're in stage 2 and you have 2 2-star upgrades, 1 tank, 1 damage dealer, this is going to be the best augment you could ever see. Just take it and don't feel bad about it. Not Today, Crown Guarded. A lot of the item augments are really powerful in the early game. So if we take a look at these 2 augments in particular, let's see, how do they perform in stage 2? 4.42 and 4.43, pretty decent, right? But as the game goes on, 4.6, 4.57, 4.61, 4.61, items get like a little bit weaker because you'll build items on your carry. So a lot of things in TFT revolve around making 3 items on your units, and on your primary carry, you cannot put like 4 items on them. So after a certain amount of time, items have some sort of diminishing return. Secondary carries, while they do a little bit of work, they're never that important. They just like are always secondary. So getting an extra item for them isn't really that great. And that's kind of what these do in the later parts of the game. So that's why they perform really well early on. But in stage 3 and stage 4, even though you do want a combat augment, you prefer something like Inspiring Epitaph, for example, over here, or like Cybernetic Bulk, for example. Other augments to kind of look out for during stage 2, though, they're going to be all the econ ones. There are like a ton of gold augments, by the way, but Clear Bench, where was that? Or Clear Mind, this one is really good because you get to level 8 really quickly. Metabolic Accelerator, really solid for that. Trade Sector, if you're forcing reroll, like I guess you could take this. I wouldn't really do that, but it is an option. Rich Get Richer, I know this is an econ augment, but it's not my favorite. I prefer Three's Company over it because you could potentially get like a lot of direction for your team comp. So you could always match whatever items you have to like the 3-cost carries. Or if you're like forcing country, Three's Company could be like a giga high roll if you get very specific units. After that, we have like a bunch of combat augments. During stage 2, they are always going to be a little bit weaker. So pretty much this whole list from starting, I think here, where Jeweled Lotus is, like all the way down, most of these are like 90% of them are going to be combat augments. These are going to be great later on. For example, Martyr 4.68 in stage 2, but then it improves to 4.4, 4.3. So kind of keep that in mind as you're going through this type of list. But I'm trying to look for ones that are like really stand out ones. I guess like a lot of the trait augments you kind of want to avoid, like Razzle Dazzle, Heartthrobs, Double the Funk, Extended Play, Ramping Rhythm are all at the bottom. But there isn't anything like that egregious that I think you should never take in gold. Obviously, everything is situational. I guess like don't take low interest rates. There are much better augments to take than that one. But a lot of these ones that are like bad down here, you still can take them. They just are a bit situational. Let's move on into some of the ones that do not appear on stage 2. Last Stand. If you are low health or if you have Heartsteel, pretty much always take Last Stand. Crash Test Dummies. Oh my god, I don't. This is just the best augment in the game right now, bar none. If you ever see this in your augment selection, like pretty much insta take it, but it is best in comps that lack frontline because the crash dummies give you frontline for yourself. So if you have like a lot of tanks already, like there might be something better if you get like Jeweled Lotus, for example. Maybe you want that instead for more damage. But if you are lacking frontline, Crash Test Dummies is so good. Out of these other ones, Little Buddies, another special mention, very powerful right now. Just make sure you actually make use of the buff. Little Buddies is the one where your 4 and 5 cost units get a little bit of a buff for every 1 and 2 cost you play. So it's really good in vertical comps. So if you're playing like, let's say KDA, for example, both your Ahri and your Akali are going to get buffed up by like the Lilia that you play, the Seraphine that you play. There are a couple other ones I'm missing. I think you play Kennen in that comp too. Go to bunnymuffins.lol/meta to get the full team comp. Apart from that, I think another one that I really like a lot is Teaming Up. This one you get 1 random support item and 2 random 4-cost champions. In a meta where it's a fast 8 meta and you're playing the 4-cost lottery, getting 2 4-costs is really good. So I like this one a ton. Even on like stage 4, it's averaging like a 4.5 there right now. I don't even care. I'm playing the lotto, right? Like obviously it's better on stage 3 because you get 4-cost units at stage 3, but even on stage 4, it's one of my favorite ones to take right now. Out of all the other ones, I don't think there's anything that special. 3's a crowd. Don't get fooled by the really good averages. It's only good because people only take it in comps that use it. For example, the country comp, they run Samira, they run Vex, they run Amumu, they run Set, they run Urgot. There might be other ones I'm missing, but I've listed out 5 3-cost units, and for every 3-cost unit, you get 85 health on your entire team. So what is 5 times 85? That's going to be 425 health. If we compare that to Cybernetic, so we go up here, type in Cybernetic Bulk. This one gives 333 health, and your champion needs to be holding an item. So you could already see like the power discrepancy, and this is also already a good augment. It averages like a 4.37. That's how good 3's company is. But again, you can only use it in certain comps, and that's why the stats are really high. So again, like don't rely on data, but it is pretty useful to kind of check out. Let's move on into Prismatic now. This is obviously the last category. Let's sort by 2-1 placements again. And we have Buried Treasures at the top. No surprise there. It's one of those delayed augments that we talked about before. Shopping Spree. This one is absolutely bonkers right now. So again, we're in a fast 8 meta, right? This one gives you gold per round. So you get tons of econ. And then you also get a ton of shop refreshes equal to your level, which carry over between rounds. That means once you reach level 8 in stage 4, and you can 4-1. You don't need to wait till 4-2 because you get the 1 gold per round. You have like tons of gold that game. Let's count how many rolls you get for free. So you reach level 4, reach level 5, 6, 7, you get 30 free rerolls. That's like 60 gold worth of rolls, all from 1 prismatic augment. Like fast 8 meta, no one cares about the early game anyways, and you get 1 gold per round. So you get like, I don't know, how much gold is that? Like 80 gold or something? It's a lot of gold worth of free rolls. And that's why this augment is so good right now. It's very meta dependent. There are going to be some metas where this is going to suck, but right now it is extremely good. Freaky Friday is one of my favorite prismatic augments because I like Infinity Force. It works on pretty much every comp. Even on units where it's like quote unquote bad on, it's still good. And you get 2 of these items. So prismatics, they normally just give like a radiant item worth of power. If you look at like radiant relics or like Pandora's items 3, both of these just give like 1 radiant item, right? So that's equivalent to 2 regular items. But Freaky Friday, you get 2 artifact items. That's 1.5 times 2, that's 3 items. Very powerful stuff. So you just get like a ton of value from this augment. And it's also one of those like semi-delay augments too. Roll the dice. This one is really good for win streaking in the early game. You get a free 2-star in set 10 if you buy a headliner unit. So you just buy any headliner, roll the dice on them. You always have a good user for it. That's why it performs really, really well right now. And you might have noticed, like in past sets, like this was never like a top 4 augment, right? But the reason why it's a top 4 augment is because of the headliner mechanic, and you just always have like a good user for it. Living Forge is another good delayed augment. This is the one where you get an artifact anvil every 10 player combats. March of Progress, really good for any 3-cost reroll comps. So again, Country, something to consider. Yone, Riven, who are the other 3 costs you could reroll right now? I'm definitely missing some. I'm gonna have to go to bunnymuffins.lol/meta to get some of these comps. So Country that we talked about, Yone we talked about, Emo reroll you could even do. Some people like Misfortune reroll. I only like doing it if you get the That's Jazz Baby augment, but I've seen some people, they do well on it even without it. But you have a couple of different options for 3-cost reroll from March of Progress, but normally I'd lean more towards the Country comp. Stationary support, absolutely bonkers. You get a training dummy and 2 support items. It's a little risky though. I don't recommend taking this if you don't play flexibly, because you're gonna have to make the items work somehow. Sometimes they give you some funky combinations that don't work well together. Like the overall value of them is pretty big, but sometimes they just don't synergize together at all. So I wouldn't take this unless you're comfortable with a little bit of risk. Spoils of War, not a big fan of this, but if you have like an insane start, like sure, try to take it. Radiant Relics I don't really like. Pandora's items don't really like. They do perform well though, but I don't like them because a lot of the comps right now are kind of duo carry comps. Like my favorite comp is like the Ezreal Caitlyn build, and Radiant items don't work as well on those builds. So it depends on your playstyle. If you play 1 carry comps, such as like Jax reroll, let's see, like Ahri Sentinels, Radiant Relics is going to be really good because you only care about 1 unit, drop a Radiant item on them, and the multipliers just go insane, right? But if you have multiple carries, you want like a lot of different items. Like Freaky Friday is good for multiple carry comps because you get like a ton of items that are both pretty good, and you could kind of spread the love a bit. But if you get a Radiant item, it only helps 1 unit. So it's obviously performing really decent. It's like a 4.43, and that is like in the upper half of all these like stage 2 augments, but not my favorite so far. Cybernetic Bulk, I would only take this if you get the item portals. So if you get a portal where you get a free item, or if you get one where you get a bunch of components, or if you're playing like loaded carousel where each carousel gives like an extra component, that's the kind of the only times I would take Cybernetic Bulk. But later parts of the game, like 4.1a, 4.19, it's extremely, extremely good because in the later parts of the game, you just have more items to kind of choose from. Caretaker's Chosen, I kind of pass on this, but maybe some people like that. This is kind of like a delayed augment as well. Pumping Up, this one's like half and half, semi-delayed and some power now. Looking at some of the other ones, I'm not really too keen. Tiniest Titans is really good for econ. Going Long, I honestly haven't tried that one yet. Cruel Pack, I would avoid this one. Level Up, very good for fast aiding, though I do prefer it in a fast 9 meta, but obviously that doesn't exist anymore. And looking at the other ones, Hologram I think is one of the most overrated augments ever. Only take Prismatic Ticket if you have a good start for a reroll comp. You could just like take this. I know the averages are bad. It's like a 4.89 overall, 4.77 in stage 2. But if you have great items for a specific reroll comp, like I'm talking perfect items, right? Then you could take this and just hard force it, like call out the comp in chat and then like mute all. So if you really want to play like Jax, take Prismatic Ticket, tell everyone you're going Jax, slam Jeweled Gauntlet, Hand of Justice, and call it a day after that. Birthday Present, I'm not the biggest fan of. You want to reach like level 9, and I feel like it's very difficult to reach level 9 comfortably now. What you want to do is you want to like power level up to level 8, roll down on level 8, and then level to level 9. But with Birthday Present, you kind of want to just go straight to level 9. And it's kind of difficult to do that right now because in stage 4, everyone's reaching level 8. They're taking all the good units, and then they're like blasting everyone, right? So it's kind of hard to take. All these other ones aren't that great. Starter Kit, I'm actually surprised isn't performing better. That one actually is a bit confusing to me. I don't know what they changed about it. I don't know what they changed about this. I don't think they actually changed anything, but it feels weird to play Starter Kit right now. I was never like a big fan of it when the augment came out, but right now not performing so well. But let's take a look at some of the other augments down at the bottom. Binding Speed, not my first choice. It gives you a Gwynsu's Rage Blade. Like it's a pretty awful item right now. I probably wouldn't take this like ever. Golden Egg, obviously if you have like a ton of life and a strong board, take this on stage 4, but if not, never touch it. Wellness Trust, I don't really take this one that much. I feel like it's like super situational. You have to have a ton of gold, and you're gonna have to take an econ augment in stage 3. In stage 3, I much rather have one of those combat augments. So if we take a look at some of these placements here, like there are a ton of good ones that are like above average. And I just think there are like better options overall than the one that we were looking at. But looking at the other ones that we kind of skipped over, Infernal Contract, only take this if you're playing like country reroll. If you're playing 3-cost reroll, this might seem like a good augment to take, but if you're playing like Yone, you really want stuff like Kiana. You might even want like Kane as an edgelord to kind of help you out, but you can't go past level 7. A lot of comps, they want to add on a lot of different synergies to them, and that includes a lot of the 3-cost reroll comps. The only exception to that is country reroll, where you don't need to go past level 7 because you could fit your entire board at level 7. I think you actually only need like level 6. Let's take a look at it. So we have the comp here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units. That's without a country chosen. So you literally could drop Tom Kench, play country headliner, and you only have 6 units on the board, and then you add in like a extra one for fun. Some people like to play Set because he's both a bruiser and a mosher, and then you take out Katarina in that case. So you really don't need extra levels when you play this comp. In fact, like you don't even need level 7. You really just need level 6 because like who cares that much about Set? And the comp is pretty much good to go, right? So country reroll makes really good use of both Infernal Contract and what's the other one called? Like Twin Terror. Is Twin Terror here? Yeah, Twin Terror is also here. And the averages for these augments are kind of skewed because I guarantee you, if you look up how country does with Twin Terror and with Infernal Contract, it's definitely a lot better than the averages you see overall. Freaky Friday Plus, generally I like this one. Also, Impenetrable Bulwark, not my biggest fan. Tiniest Titan Plus, this one is very similar to the other Tiniest Titan. You just get bonus gold as well because they need to buff it for stage 3. Again, I don't like econ augments in stage 3, but if you are super low health, this is a great way to gain some of the health back, and sometimes you're forced to take it. Final Reserves, we're just not in like a Fast 9 meta right now. So this one is actually, wow, it's 5.41. Yeah, I didn't know it was that bad, but I wouldn't take it in general just because we're not in a level 9 meta. Overwhelming Force, if you really need AD items and you're forcing AD, this is obviously incredible. You get Deathblade, Infinity Edge, and a BF Sword. That's probably the 2 best items for most AD carries right now. Lucky Gloves Plus, really good if you can make 2 Lucky Gloves. I wouldn't take this if you can only make 1 of them, but very strong combat augment. What the Forge? So this one is a little funny because people love taking this because it looks cool, right? You're like, oh wow, I get so many cool items, right? But you have to be very careful when taking this. I only take it if I have horrible items or if I have a ton of items. So if you took, let's say, Buried Treasures, and then you get the choice of What the Forge later on, you're going to get some incredible value because you just got like tons of free Ornn items, right? So only take this if you're on an item portal or got an item augment earlier on, and that'll make this super, super good. Hedge Fund Plus, not the biggest fan of that. Don't like econ in later stages. Binary Airdrop, this augment is absolutely incredible right now because there are so many duo carry comps. So anything that uses like 2 tanks, 2 carries, gonna be great with Binary. Hedge Fund Plus Plus, same thing, don't really like that. Endless Hordes, I haven't really tried this one yet, but it's really hard to take advantage of the benefits of Endless Horde. So Endless Horde is really good if you can fit a lot of units for a particular trait in. So it's pretty decent last set when you could reach like 9 traits, for example. But right now, it's very difficult to reach 9 and 10 traits because you need 2 specific emblems or spatula items, and that's just like way too hard to get right now. Last one's Unleash Arcana. No one's playing AP comps right now, so you don't really want to click that one. I don't care what the averages say, but that's going to pretty much run down all the prismatic augments. So again, if you look at all the augments, you want to do in stage 2, econ, combat, but sometimes I do combat because if you hit the comp, that's going to be the most powerful thing ever. But the issue with TFT is that we don't always hit our comp. So the econ augment really helps you get there. But in a perfect world, if you're playing like 1st or 8th or like trying to get 1st place, it's most likely a guy with like 3 combat augments because that's just how you get the most power to your team. Another thing to note about the combat augments that we talked about a little bit before is that the item augments, which are, I consider them combat augments because they make your team stronger, they are going to be stronger in the early game. Again, it's due to the way items work and the way like multiplication works in TFT. But overall, that's going to be it for me today. Again, econ combat is going to be the way to go. Or like some of the delay ones that we talked about before, such as like help is on the way, stationary support, Freaky Friday is also a delayed one, because we're really just trying to lose streak in the early game and then stabilize in the mid game and then roll down at level 8 and hit everything. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed that. Again, this is going to be on teamfight.lol, and let me know down in the comments if you have any questions. I'll try to get to as many as I can.